bringing you inside the USL Championship and League One.
Segmer's got there. Marquinhos! He's been knocking on the door. He knocks it down.
Diving into all the biggest stories and top headlines.
You are ripping and roaring today.
This is USL All Access.
It's almost impossible to recreate that level of magic.
With Mike Watts and Devin Kerr on SiriusXM FC.
Welcome, everyone, to a new edition of USL All Access on SiriusXM FC. Happy Tuesday, wherever you might be. If you've been living under a rock, you may have missed that there was giant news that came on Thursday about the USL planning to implement a new Division One league. We're going to talk at length about that. This is also our Eastern Conference preview edition of the show. Next week, we'll talk about the West. And, of course, Devin puts out the bat signal, and everyone's got questions. We're going to answer them later in the show. Mike Watts, Devin Kerr, Emmett McConnell is at the controls. Always. Dev, how's your knee feeling, buddy? I got a lot of Eric Winalda was asking how your knee is. I mean, everyone wants to know.
It's there. as I'm talking to you right now, it's I'm alive and well. There are two schools of thought with this, and I'm going to give everybody a shot at what I'm dealing with in a second. Number one is the knee is getting stronger. I'm progressing well for sure. I had a circulation issue. That is gone, so I'm very grateful. People go, circulation issue? Yeah, I stood up for 5 minutes, and if I went longer than that, my leg went numb. A little bit strange and a little bit freaky. The main issue that I'm having now is a little bit of swelling. And by a little bit, I mean a lot of it. I just finished my rehab about 2 hours ago. I go every single day. And right now, I'd probably prefer not to be sitting. The good news for all the SiriusXM FC listeners and YouTube people at home, you can see what looks like a fake leg. That's actually my compression sleeve. Mike, you like the little skin tone there?
This is good. This is Dexter season 1 good.
It's not a garter, by the way, so get your mind out of the gutter. But the footballing community has been great. Friends in the area have been great. Obviously, you and I have spoken multiple times. I certainly took for granted all of the little things, and that will not happen again. I guess that's what happens when you don't have a knee surgery for a decade.
No. And for those of us like me who've never had a knee surgery, I haven't had to worry about it. So
I got to be like Stu Holden. I get one a year, get it back on rotation, and then I get crumble cookies every year. It's perfect.
I'm nervous about all these MLS announcers. I mean, Stu's been doing some work there. I mean, Dunny last year had the major surgery on his leg. I mean,
we're all going down, man. We're all going down. They're just picking us off left, right. And by the way, I didn't even realize it's all the analysts too.
It is. No, us play-by-plays.
What is in the water?
Well, we are not physically encumbered because we never physically gave the effort. All right, Dev, let's chat about the news on Thursday. It was first reported by The Athletic. A couple hours later, the USL put out their own release to this effect. The USL is creating a Division One league with the intention to launch in 2027, the year after the World Cup comes here, with 12 to 14 teams. Let's chat about this a little bit. There's long-term ambition for sure, not the least of which to eventually, and I know, stop me if you've heard it before, create promotion relegation in this country. There's the championship in League One. If you look at the grander European, specifically English naming system, you'd think it'd be something like Premier Championship League One in the future. A number of teams got mentioned by name within the Athletic piece. Louisville, Sacramento, Indy, Phoenix, Las Vegas. All have either had significant stadium ambitions or in markets that have had MLS interest. So as it pertains to a D1 league, I can't say any of those are a surprise. Rhode Island, Jacksonville. They have been among the teams that have put out very vocal interest on social media after the announcement was made. Now, let's talk about sanctioning in this country for a moment. The idea of sanctioning really goes back to checking boxes. That's really what this is. So the pro league standard for Division One, while there's others for sure, these are the primary boxes that have to be checked and are currently checked by Major League Soccer. Minimum of 12 teams. It has to be 14 by the third year. It has to be in the three most populous time zones in the U.S. That's the East, the Central, Pacific. 75% of teams need to be in metro markets. You might go look at the city of Louisville or the city of Providence or the city of, right? But it's the metro area has to be over 1 million. And then stadiums all, not most, all have to have the capacity minimum of 15,000. Then you get to the ownership side of it. It's $40 million net worth by the principal owner, $70 million for the overall group. There has to be a broadcast contract, which MLS, that's Apple, USL, that's ESPN and CBS. Full-time staff within the teams, full-time league operations staff. Dev, that's a lot of 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
My first thought is this was in some ways inevitable. It's the nature of it. A reporter that I know very well who's been at Yahoo and Reuters makes a fair point. There are currently 0 stadiums over 15,000 within USL. Is this a develop current markets? Is this a welcome in new markets? Probably both in the long run, if I had to guess. If you look at the intent of Portland, Seattle, Cincinnati, they were all in similar boats and ended up getting into much more significant, whether it be ownership or stadia or whatever it may be, to get into a Division I level. So I'm not necessarily nervous about how that's all going to play out. But it is very staggering from the outside looking in. I don't think you or I are shocked by it, but it is news that on its face is pretty earth-shattering.
I would say my initial response would be this, not shocked in terms of the news coming out. I am a bit surprised that the idea is to create their own D1 first and separate from its current structure. That's something I want to hone in on here, right here, Mike, is you talked about what the teams might look like. It's going to be a little bit of both. That's exactly what it's going to be. In their release on USL HQ, they talked about an application process in which they're going to oversee and look at current existing teams as well as new markets and new teams that will be part of those applicants as well. The idea goes, okay, great. Well, the standard's going to have to come up. There's no doubt about that. And I mean that at every single level. Right now, I'm talking about the playing level because we see it in every single season when we go to an Open Cup game that, okay, teams go on a run. Your Detroit Cities, right? Your Pittsburghs, okay, great. Your New Mexico Uniteds. But can they do it at that level in a 34-game season, right? And you and I can both unequivocally answer, no, they can't. Not at this point in time. If you took Louisville's insane season last year, all due respect to everyone in that organization, if we took that team, given their talent and their depth, assuming
they certainly wouldn't be playing the same way in MLS.
No, number one. And number two, again, Eastern Western Conference. Let's assume there's no interconference. They're just in the East. Do they win 5? Like but that's the conversation. Whether it's between 5 and 10 or less than 5, like that's what we're talking about. The disparity between the level of talent. So that's going to have to come up. I do have an issue with one thing, and I think it's interesting because America only knows bigger, badder, right? Grandiose. That's fine. That's part of the DNA, and I respect that. However, I personally feel that the stadium requirement should be smaller. Why, Devin? Why do they have to change? Why do you have to do something different? Number one, everybody relax. It's okay to be different, right? Look at Mike and I. I had to, buddy. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah.
The idea that a 15,000 seat stadium is the marker in this country, to me, is, I don't know if ridiculous is the right word, but I do believe that it is incorrect. You know what the current standard is in the EPL, Mike?
No.
So I went back and I looked it up for the past 2 seasons, both for Luton Town when they were coming in to the 23-24 season, as well as Ipswich that were coming into 24-25. There's a little bit of a separation in terms of the actual information that's out there, but I will read you this. This is from foottheball.com. Great website, excellent sources. The requirements for Luton Town going into the 23-24 season. Every Premier League stadium requirement. They must have a stadium with a minimum capacity of 5,000
Wow.
2,000 seats. Now, I found another article that talks about the necessary changes for Ipswich Town coming in to the 2024-25 season. Shaw Brown, nice to see you. That's Shaw Brown, producer friend of ours. That's his team. Gotta love him. He carries a scarf everywhere that his dad gave him. I love that for him. And it talked about how they had to increase their capacity from 2,000 to 3,000 in terms of seating requirements. So my guess is that the minimum went from 2 to 3. Still, the capacity at 5,000. There is just so much culture around this country, Mike, that regardless of league, you need to give the ability for the teams and those communities to harness it. And I feel like the 15,000 number is too high. One more thing before you come back, okay? In the article, there was, and we're going to get to some of the tweets later on in this show, but there was a really interesting one to me that someone put out, and it was talking about whether or not there was communication at this point, direct communication, not a pipe dream that USL HQ has put out into the universe in hopes that this is going to happen. I'm specifically referencing D1 sanctioning here and targeting that 2027 year. Paul McDonough came out and said, USL executives met with US Soccer to go over their plans, and he said at this stage there's no pushback from US Soccer. We shared our plan and our vision with them. He said they were very good and asked what they could do to help. Now, they went on to talk about a couple of different marks, but I think it's very important to point out that Paul McDonough said directly they've already been in contact with US Soccer. I can tell you right now, man, if they've been in contact with US Soccer and this is the news that's coming out and Paul McDonough, who runs the league, the president, is in charge and he's saying that, I got to believe that they've met in person. I don't know. I'm guessing right now, right? Like the idea of, hey, we're doing all this over the phone seems a little bit in the dark. Regardless of what you feel in that area, I think there are certainly changes that need to be made to the requirements, and I think it's very important to note that this isn't just someone speaking oblivions into existence. This is something that has real momentum so far, both in the front office and the relationship with U.S. Soccer.
Yeah. Now there is a meeting of the board of governors coming this week
Tonight.
Which I'm sure those conversations will continue well outside the actual meeting. I look forward to hearing that audio.
Peter Trevisani doesn't know, but I put it in his luggage, and he's going to carry it in with him. So there we go. The bug's out of the bag.
It's in the pen. Yeah, look, here's one other thing I would add before there's a ton of news to get to in terms of player movement, and we're going to preview all the teams in the East. Let's look back a year and a half ago, right? The USL Super League initially was, we're going to create a professional women's soccer league. And they started to look at the markets they had and the stadiums they had and the ownerships that they had. And they went, wait a minute, we check all the boxes. When I say it's a box checking exercise, it doesn't mean that USL is going to create a premier division and the next year it's going to be competing for the likes of Christian Benteke, right? That's not what this is. MLS has had a 30-year jump. The Premier League has had a 100-year jump. I know it wasn't always called the Premier League. You get my point. First division. There's a long way to go. But this is step one. Literally step one.
You know what? And this is a fun one for me to ask you because you are a history buff when it comes to sports. I always pick your brain about these types of things. It's someone that a producer friend brought up to us, and it was an interesting one. I had to go look it up. And they posed this question. They said, do you think it could work? And I said, absolutely. I think anything's possible. And he goes, it is interesting that, at least to our knowledge, the producer that shall remain nameless, you're obviously involved in this conversation now as well as everybody else on SiriusXM FC and people watching at home or listening on the app or on YouTube. That, do you know of another sport, certainly not in the United States, that has another Division I team, like league? More than one Division I? No. So my brain goes back to the past. I think NBA and ABA. I think the AFL and NFL. Do you know when the NFL and AFL merged?
We're talking the 60s.
Yeah. Do you know when the NFL was founded?
1915. Am I in the ballpark?
Something. Yeah, you're like in the area. And
Yeah, when it was the Rhode Island.
We're basically talking 40, 50 years until it become the modern iteration of what we see now. The ABA-NBA merger, same kind of conversation. The merger didn't happen until 1976. And I'm not saying that MLS and USL are going to merge. I'm just saying that, like, people in this country are quick to point out, they're like, oh, that'll never work. We are not that far removed. I understand it is a different universe in those two sports that we're talking about. But it's really not that far in our history where other Division I's in this country that had storied history, sports that were planted here much longer before soccer was, and there were two Division I's. It's just something to think about. It's something to mess around with around the dinner table at night, you know?
Yep. All right. So there's going to be plenty of talk about this all year and probably for the next 3 years. Luckily, Devin and I are under contract through the end of the 2025 season, so we'll be here to chat about it.
Plenty of months to get fired.
FC. This is USL All Access. Dev, a couple of things to mention. Cal Jennings to the Battery, A+, right?
Massive. The biggest thing that the Charleston Battery are going to be looking for, it's not a replacement on the wing, it's goals. The departure of Marcanic and trying to figure out how they're going to fit him in there. They have a couple of strikers that they can run deep now. MD Myers obviously involved in that conversation. Jackson Conway as well. But the goals got to come from somewhere. And one of the best strikers in this league over the past 5 seasons has been Cal Jennings. By air, land, or sea, he finds a way to get it done.
Yep. Next week, we're going to preview the West, which means we'll chat about Lexington finding their man in goal, Nico Capitano. Levante Johnson is headed to Colorado Springs. Gideon Zalalem has now landed in Albuquerque, will be part of New Mexico. The former Rowdy Freddie Kleeman has made the move out to Sacramento with Neil Collins. No surprise there, I suppose. Dev, before we go to break, 2 quicks. Birmingham and Nashville have come to an agreement on Matthew Corcoran. He arrived in Birmingham at 15. He's 18 now. Hip injury last year, missed most of the season. Yay, nay?
Yes, the hip certainly a problem. I think it's a great move for him. I love the idea of the national team setup. BJ Callahan is already familiar with him. His playing style, I think the biggest thing for Matt is staying healthy, number one, and getting games. He had just gotten into a rhythm at the end of 23, kind of picking up that starting role before running into that injury issue. So that's a big one for him.
And Devin, in the year of our Lord, what was the combination of Jurgen Damm and Dom Dwyer considered a top-tier option in this country?
Oh, dude. Jurgen Damm, the fastest man on the planet, or used to be.
2019? Is that when that pairing would have been peak?
The 17 to 19 window just stings the nostrils.
It does.
Unreal. Oakland Roots just always making the moves, right?
Yep, Jurgen Damm, who spent almost close to a decade on the books at Tigres when they won the sort of team of the decade moniker, is headed to Oakland. We'll chat about that next week. Coming up on the other side of the break, the Eastern Conference, we're going alphabetically. You can't say we're anything more than going anti or opposite of alphabetical. All right? We love your team. This is USL All Access, SiriusXM FC.
Let's get back to USL All Access on SiriusXM FC with Mike Watts and Devin Kerr.
We're back here on USL All Access on this Tuesday night. Miss any part of the show, available tomorrow on the USL YouTube page with full color video. Also available on the SiriusXM app. No video at all if that's what you prefer. Mike Watts, Devin Kerr, Emmett McConnell's at the controls. We're going to go alphabetically through the Eastern Conference, try and keep it tight. The Birmingham Legion lead us off in our previews for the season in the East, coming off a 45-point 9th place finish. They missed by 3. Dev, they lose Alex Cronali, Derek Dodson in their back line. Kasim and Wegbo are out. Perez, Pino up front are out. But here's the thing. They got a new goalkeeper, a little more competition there. Lalo Delgado, Thiago, the homegrown from New England's coming in. And then Danny Trejo and Ronaldo Damas. They got their guys.
Yeah, I'm going to stay up top here out of all due respect to everybody else within that organization. I'm looking at goals. I always have for the Birmingham Legion. There's no doubt in my mind, regardless of what formation it is, the way that they go about their game model and attacking the game, back to front is the way that this Birmingham Legion squad has always been led. Jay Heaps, Tommy Sohn, they have really good structure defensively. They always find a way, by hook or by crook, always injuries popping up and difficult ones, to find their way through the midfield. But it's about the striker position. Danny Trejo commanded a massive, absolutely astronomical number possibly record-breaking, I've heard, in the offseason. This is one of those moments that you get no grace whatsoever. You are coming in, and he is going to be expected to push 15-plus goals. That's not even a question.
Chance to make the playoffs? You want to throw a percent on these?
I would look at it from the eyes of a Birmingham Legion fan, and they have to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
That if I'm sitting there, I'm not saying the chances that they're going to. The roster build is still 3 weeks out. I need to see what the rest of it looks like, even though they're going through preseason right now. Look, they got Charleston Battery picked up Cal Jennings last week. Like these last minute acquisitions are going to continue to come. Guys are going to fall off of MLS rosters. I'm not willing to put a percentage on them at this point in time. But if I'm going to hammer down right now, and I'm a Birmingham guy, I no matter what, this team has to make the playoffs. Tommy Sohn and Jay Heap said it at the end of last season. The fans deserve better.
No doubt. All right, Charleston, second place in the East, 64 points. They lost the Eastern Conference Final, as you remember, to Rhode Island, 2-1. Nick Marcanic was always going to go. That giant deal over to Spain. Adam Grinwis is retired. Robbie Crawford did too. They brought in Nanan Hosu, Johnny Klein, Langston Blackstock from Pittsburgh, Joey Appanonu, who had been in Hartford for a bit, but really Cincinnati. Luis Zamudio, so another goalkeeper. Maybe they're number one. And then up front, Douglas Martinez, who has not really been good in the last 4 years, and Cal Jennings.
Yeah, and Cal Jennings. I love how you put that on the end of it.
Well, we had already talked about him. So
no, but listen. Charleston has a problem, and it's a good problem to have. They've got a wealth of talent up front. We referenced that in segment one. Again, Cal Jennings, Jackson Conway, and M.D. Myers. 3 very different players, 3 great options for Ben Pierman and Lee Cohen to have going forward. Friendly reminder, Arturo Rodriguez still pulling the strings. Where do you utilize him? Is it going to be in the 10? Are they going to let him float outside? I think the wings are going to be a big question mark for me. And also, what's the best combination within the midfield? We talked about Nanan Hosu already. I watched this team in preseason play against DC United. They were clean. They made 2 mistakes against an MLS squad in the first half where the Charleston Battery were better. I saw DC cross over midfield 3 times. Twice was on a counterattack after a poor giveaway. Twice they gave up a goal. The rest of it they controlled. That midfield, not on Hosu, right? I'm looking at Chris Allen. Obviously, we're going to be looking at Aaron Malloy. What's the best fit on a regular basis to help this team build all over the place because they love to be ball dominant?
All right, D is for Detroit, 56 points, 3rd place in the East. Coming off their first ever home game in the playoffs. That was their goal last year, but ousted in penalties by Tampa Bay. Maxi Rodriguez is the big name, no doubt, headed to Rhode Island. Nate Steinwasser retires, had been sort of a tentpole player for them. Yazid Matthews, Ryan Williams, Brett Levi's, Laurent Kisiadou, Elvis Amo, James Murphy, all out, all played big roles last year in their own way. In terms of players coming in, Shane Wheat, Maury Donor, some defenders, Darren Smith, another foreign striker that they brought in, Jay Chapman, who's got, right, Dev, huge potential, but we haven't seen it in this league often enough. Where's Detroit in all this?
I see them right now as kind of right where they finished off last year. I would say the good news is the pieces they brought in, very versatile, right? Shane Wheat, Maury Donor, the utilization of them. We've seen it under Danny Dikiu a couple of different times, how he likes to over-pivot in certain areas. He flattens them out. Really aggressive back line with 3, can sit deep with 5, can play in a 4. Just a lot of very different looks. Maxi Rodriguez, to me, is certainly going to be the biggest loss. He's not the massive goal scorer or assist maker that everybody thinks he's going to be on a regular basis. I don't think that's bad. To me, it's about effort. It's about command and who's going to take that over here. Also, with Darren Smith coming in, the South African striker, a guy who hits the net about 33% of the time in games, Detroit's never really had that go-to striker up top. It seems like we're having a similar conversation as we did with Birmingham. Well, Detroit's just a couple of years behind. The build is actually quite similar in the way that they've changed through the way that they play over the years, still found a way to be relevant within the playoff conversation. They still pick off some big names. They've both made Open Cup runs, but it feels like that attacking piece up top is what is going to get either one of those teams, certainly Darren Smith in Detroit City and Danny Dikiu over the line.
All right, so Detroit finished 3rd last year behind Charleston and Louisville. Meanwhile, Hartford finished right outside the line. I mean, look, if things had gone a different way on the last day, I mean, they needed 4 or 5 things to break. the right way for them to get in, but they were, in fact, right there. 44 points, 39 goals in 34 games, struggled to score consistently. We spent a lot of time last year with Brendan Burke on these coach calls where he's going, who's called a foxhole guy. Call him whatever the hell you want. But essentially, who do I want here next year? And the guys who make winning plays on losing teams can help you turn it around. Most of the team is gone, right? Danny Barrera, captain the side from the beginning. Thomas Vanke Azil is out. Marcus Epps is out. Tristan Hodge, Reynan Ribeiro, Anderson Asiadu, they're all gone. Cariaga comes in. That's pretty interesting. Adrian Diaz-Pay should solidify that back line. Jonathan Jimenez is in. Sebastian Anderson, who we'd seen in Colorado in the past, is coming in. Dev, I guess in Brendan I trust, but this is a lot of change. I'm not saying it's like a total second redo, but I mean, they definitely took out the trash where they felt they needed to.
Oh, trash, huh? That's where you're going with? Wow. I'm aggressive, but that was very well put, I might add. And yes, I agree with you. I just didn't know you were going to utilize that word. Needed to happen 100%. I mean, this is simple to me. For, what is that, 19 to 24, is that 6 seasons? Yeah. 6 seasons. I did that math on the fly, everybody.
You don't need to carry any number.
Listen, we're in single digits. I'll carry whatever I want, okay? For anybody at home, I'm actually not bad at the mathematics.
He's not as bad as
fly.
He's not as bad as he puts on.
No, not at all. It's just I need a pen and a piece of paper, and I'll rock it out real quick. I can even do it in my head if I'm not doing it in 1 second. The regimes have always found crossover, and I've never been fully ingrained into the next guy coming in. I don't mean that as disrespect to Brendan Burke or Harry Watling or Roddy Jaidi, but since Jimmy Nielsen, the first manager in 2019, everything has been a dramatic change to the next guy, right? So it's like Jimmy Nielsen, that team in 19 start 8 games on the road. You put him in a coffin before the year even went. Well, then you go to the next manager, Roddy Jaidi, who I absolutely loved, and he did great things with them, but his time was small. And then Harry Watling comes in. And then Brendan Burke. Everybody's playing catch-up. Brendan Burke is doing the same thing. Brendan Burke, to me, is going to evolve this year. And the way that he's going to evolve is something that I referenced on the last show. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is about the back line. This is about solid goalkeeping and finding a way to keep the ball out of the back of the net. You mentioned Adrian Diaz-Pay. He's one of those pieces that can be a Swiss Army knife that can give you a couple of different ways to go about that. But veteran leadership here, finding a way to be unbreakable. And the reason I say he's got to evolve, for everybody that knows him and people that don't, Brendan Burke is a sports car on nitrous mixed with a little bit of sugar rush and a little bit more, going 100 miles an hour, running a bunch of attacking options down your throat, and he's been successful doing so. The league is different now. He's got to be a little bit more balanced. Him clearing house gives them the ability to get the proper people there and find success.
Dev, these are 6 numbers. So well done. Congrats. I wrote it down for you.
For all our listeners on SiriusXM FC, he literally just wrote down 19 to 24, all of the years in Cuatro, side by side.
You're welcome. All right. Indy finished 4th under their new manager last year, 51 points. They hosted Rhode Island. That was by the tiebreaker, which I think a lot of people want to talk about tiebreakers. I don't have time for that. They lost that quarterfinal 3-2 either way. Elvis and Mo mentioned him earlier. Edward Kizza, who had another double-digit year in Pittsburgh. Bruno Rendon was the League One Player of the Year at Northern Colorado. James Murphy in from Detroit. Patrick Hogan in from Pittsburgh. Maybe a new goalkeeper in Anthony Siaha, although they retain the keeper they had last year who came in on loan from Portland. All right, in terms of players out, Douglas Martinez, again, it didn't click. Tyler Gibson, Seba Guinzotti, Augie Williams, Lawrence Wutton, Ben Mines, Callum Chapman-Page, and the aforementioned Adrian Diaz-Pay. It feels like they're more or less in the same place they were last year.
Yes, but they've got to perform.
Yeah.
We never, at no point in time last year when I looked at the roster build, even when they made changes throughout the year, did I ever have a conversation going, they're missing this, they're missing that? You know, they missed Aiden Quinn. We know that, but he came back. The left-footed wonder is going to be in full fitness. I've already been chatting with him in preseason. He is amped and ready to go after it, man. But they got to fulfill their potential. Even with the Open Cup run, and I get it, it added a stunt to league play. We've seen that in so many seasons before. This team has the players. Bruno Rendon's an interesting one for me. I'd probably say the back line was probably the biggest question mark last year. Remember they changed into a 3, and then they had a slew of injuries where it felt like, especially on the left-hand side, Adrian Deespe was there. They just couldn't find a way with Josh O'Brien to really get consistent performances. You know, Rendon's one that's going to come in there. You would imagine he's going to be in a starting position. I like the build of this team. I do. I feel like they're a playoff contender, no doubt about that. I'm not necessarily sure at this point in time we're talking about a top 4, but certainly make it into postseason play.
All right, we are going alphabetically. Loudoun is right ahead of Louisville in our lists as we preview the Eastern Conference ahead of the 2025 championship season here on USL All Access. Loudoun finished 11th. They're the only positive goal difference team in the league to have missed the playoffs. Moses Nyman is back in Loudoun County. Have been down with them from DC United over the years. Look, El Medkar's gone, Hughes, Williamson, Francois. They are very much a February build team. They always have been.
100%.
So,
listen,
incomplete.
Oh, it's kind of been the conversation ever since they started, right? Richie Williams was the guy first. Then Ryan Martin came in just a couple of months later over from the DC United Academy. I want to talk about Moses Nyman for a second. Good little back and forth with Ryan Martin about Moses Nyman. I've always joked that he's the savior because of the name. This guy can be the savior for this team, at least in the midfield conversation. When he was here, he was unreal, untouchable as a deep-lying 6. They needed to cultivate his talents a little bit higher up on the field. All of a sudden, you saw this kid, and I'm saying that with all influence in the English dictionary, kid, because he was 16 years of age. He was a kid breaking through into opposing teams' boxes. Now, Mike, all of a sudden, Moses Nyman is only 21 years of age. Moses Nyman is approaching 100 professional appearances in all competitions. This kid has
breaking into boxes now. You ain't going to juvie anymore. You're going to the pen.
He's got no problem whatsoever in terms of the tools in that box of his. All he needs to do is get a little help up top. We're talking about confidence, about the belief that he can still be that guy that was coming through the DC United organization that everybody looked at. Next to Jamie Garay, right? Ted Pietro, like all of these players that made that step, he really never broke through. We're talking about 32 MLS appearances with DC United over basically a 6-year span. That's twice I did the math on the fly in my head. You're welcome. That's not enough for him at Top Flight Football, and he wants to get back to that type of level. Ryan Martin can lead him there. I don't know what the rest of it looks like is the problem. And that's kind of where we always go when it comes to Loudoun.
Yep, we'll find out in about 3 weeks' time. We are less than 3 weeks away from kickoff in the championship. When we return, the East preview continues. How about Louisville, Miami? Louisville? Miami? We're back in a moment on USL All Access.
Giving insight to all the biggest moments in Championship and League One. This is USL All Access on SiriusXM FC with Mike Watts and Devin Kerr.
We are back on USL All Access on this Tuesday night. Miss a part of the show available on the USL YouTube page or on the SiriusXM app. Mike
we
Watts,
are
Devin
back.
Kerr.
We are so very back, and we're the two best friends that anyone could have.
Less so when I get interrupted, Devin.
No. If I didn't go there then, I was going to lose tempo. I was going to lose the plot. And that's basically the story of my life. I took my shot, okay?
Yeah, let's talk about a team that did not lose the plot nor the tempo last year to start. We're going alphabetically through the Eastern Conference, giving you light previews. Shield winner, 86 goals scored, 76 points accumulated. They lost outside of the conference final for the first time in their history. They stubbed their toe on Rhode Island 3-0. Wilson Harris goes to Israel. Elijah Winder goes to the Galaxy. Wes Sharpie is out. Really, Dev, it almost felt like they made some like-for-like changes on the whole. Kevon Lambert, Zach Duncan, Josh Jones. They made the move last year to go out and get attacking help, which always felt like a precursor to Wilson Harris getting moved. I think most importantly and underratedly, Danny Cruz signs an extension. and I've had enough sources tell me Danny Cruz, there was a lot of interest.
Oh, Danny Cruz, there's a lot of interest before the 24 season.
There was a lot of interest. Louisville did quite well to get a multi-year deal done.
Well, and how is it any different, respectfully, and this is total guessing game right now. How is it any different than the Wilson Harris business where you're protecting an asset for what could happen in the future? Simple. You go sign him for a year plus one. I'm not saying this contract specifically, but get a multi-year for your player, get a multi-year for your coach. More success follows. Great. You're locked up. We want a fee. Done.
Did it with Elijah Winder as well.
100%. Did it with Elijah Winder. Okay, great. Wilson Harris set up. Like, you talk about the rumors about Danny Cruz. I heard plenty of rumors about Wilson Harris and the possibility. Friendly reminder that there are a lot of ties of what could have ended up.
Yep.
Oh, I get myself in trouble if I'd say that.
Oh, boy.
Okay. You like the business. Let's start there, Mike.
Yep. No
you
problems.
Like the business. I like the business as well. Zach Duncan, certainly the midfielder, the Australian midfielder, capped for the U23s. Control. They're going to try and fill that. Kev Lambert. We talked about this last week on the show when the news was announced that it's about reps for him, gaining confidence back up top. Josh Jones is an absolute beast of a soccer player. I can't wait to see, because I don't know how this translates at the next level. John Michael Hayden was his manager. You're talking about a guy at Indiana who knows how to win, went through the MLS, understands what it's like to play at top flight football, who always gave this kid a lot of luxury on that back line. As Josh Jones grew throughout his time with the Cardinals, he recognized about control and consistency. I would see flashes early on in his career. They say he's 6'5". Damned if he's not 6'7", and he's got to weigh 225. He makes me feel bad about myself when I stand next to him, and your hope is that if you're Louisville City and you're in front of that Modelo bar, that he's regularly coming up over there to come and have one with you because of his performances. I like him as a prospect in USL Championship, and it's really difficult not to look at Louisville once again and say, wash, rinse, repeat, let's go get it.
All right, Dev, Miami finished dead last. May have been the worst independent team in the history of the championship last year.
Keep going.
3 wins, 2 draws, 29 losses. So in comes Gaston Madoni. Bill Hamid coming in, was not good in Memphis, was playing in the NPSL last year. I hope he's there to be the assistant coach in reality. Sebastian Blanco, huge name. Lucas Milano, big name. Jonathan Ricketts, Tulu, Ricardo Rivera. They have to be better.
If that's not, you saying that with an asterisk, a question mark?
No, they literally.
What is it?
They literally have to be better.
Sure.
It is impossible to have been worse.
Everything's possible, Michael. I like Ricardo Rivera. I think it's a great pickup, and I have no idea what this Miami team is. I have no clue. We've said multiple times that the Nocerino era, I'll use the word twice, it came with an asterisk with it, right? The business that they were doing, the front office to the touchline, it didn't align, and we never really got a full glimpse of what that project should have been. And now Nocerino's in Vegas, which is a whole nother conversation, and we'll talk about that in segment 4. I don't know what this team is. The Eastern Conference, once again, is just so freaking deep and consistent, Mike.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't necessarily know who's going to go and win the East, but I can tell you what, there are a ton of teams that I think are going to make the playoffs. I don't know if Miami FC is one of them. There's a lot of unknown players. I mentioned Ricardo Rivera. Loved him when he was at Union Omaha a couple of years ago. Used more sparingly, but again, this is kind of one of those things that you're hoping the team just finds a way to get its identity together as the season goes on.
Yep. All right, North Carolina, 48 points, finished 8th, lost the conference quarterfinal, 3-2, really, really entertaining game to Louisville. Connor Donovan, Tristan Hodge made some major changes in the back line. Pedro Dolabella comes up from League One. Lamar Batista, Shaft Brewer, Nelson Blanco on the way out. I think they're probably still similar mid-table place.
Yeah, right there off the playoff line. I think we saw the best of that team at the tail end of the season. They seemed more aggressive in nature. The whole year up until I would say July or August seemed very tentative the way that they went about their business. They never were overly interested in games. Again, at least day after day after day. I just felt like watching them that I would see really good play out on the wings, and then I would see some sparks up top in the striker position. Great here and there in the midfield. Never did I see the full package really until the end of the season. I think they got a little bit lucky too. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but it's not often that we see that many teams drop all of those points at the tail end of the year to help you jump up the table. Your Loudons, your Indy 11s, your Birmingham Legions, those teams were doing them favors down the stretch, which got them right to the end.
Pittsburgh finished 7th last year, same 48 points as North Carolina. Lost 1-0 to Charleston in their conference quarterfinal. They were right there. Look, some names that are pretty significant in Pittsburgh land. Rivera, Blackstock, Hogan, Edward Kizza, right? Sterling and Johnson had moments, mainly Johnson. In Augie Williams, maybe there's more work to be done in terms of free agents. I just wrote Riverhounds Invitational Combine invitees. The expectation is you've kept the 4 or 5 players that are the centerpieces of it, and you will continue to add around it.
We said that there was no doubt in our mind last year with all of the issues that they were going through at the beginning of the season that this team would find a way to get themselves over the line. They certainly did. I actually thought they would have gone much deeper come playoff time. Statistically, the final, I believe it was final 20 games of the season. It was either 17 or 20 games of the season, Mike. They were they were defensively one of the best teams in the league, and attacking wise, I think they were 3rd overall. They were the perfect complement. Mike puts the invitees on there for a reason. Bob Lilly in the USL Championship is the best identifier of unsung talent. Let me rephrase that again. He will walk out to your backyard pickup game. He will find any player that is willing to put in the grind, that is willing to listen, and that is willing to learn. And he will turn them into an all-league player. It's that simple. And in Bob, you have to trust. That's where I'm at once again. They lost a ton of talent that went out the door. Again, what does this team look like come mid-season? It's going to be a very different team than what's on that pen and paper right now, Mike. But there's no doubt that Bob Lilly can get them there once again. Pittsburgh Riverhounds are going to be good defensively. They're going to find a way to be stout within the midfield. They always are. They had 1 year, and I mean this in terms of a player, in 2023, where you lit it up top.
Dequa.
And that's it. Albert Dequa. Every other year, like even that team in 2019 that won the East, right? Where Phoenix Rising ran away with it in the West. Pittsburgh Riverhounds won the Eastern Conference. They didn't do it. Although they got points and although they got goals, they were doing it by committee. There wasn't one player. That is the greatness of Bob Lilly.
And look, who the hell was Danny Rivera? And I mean this in the kindest way. Langston Blackstock, Patrick Hogan, where were they before they got to Pittsburgh? All due respect.
Where was Albert Dequa?
Amen. And
right?
It's not a knock on any player. Right?
Where was Kennardo Forbes? One of the greatest players to ever play the game in this league. Kennardo Forbes. Obviously,
Amen.
Rochester Rhinos, end of conversation. That's Bob Lilly.
Amen. All right, Rhode Island made the final, lost to Colorado Springs, finished 5th, 51 points, tied for 4th. Maxi Rodriguez comes in. Danny Rivera, mentioned him. Aldair Sanchez, the outside back from Sacramento. Look, the Loneys are gone. Doug and Panayiotou, Sadie and Doyle, hit and miss propositions a little bit. Rhode Island was dealing from the top of the deck here. Like, they kept 90% of this team together.
100%. Morse Duggan, what does that look like on the left side? And certainly depth within this team. No Fuson cannot be the answer for them every single week. That's where Danny Rivera comes in. That gets Noah Fuson up higher. That also takes some of the pressure off Noah with the addition of Maxi Rodriguez. It's got to be one of the bigger pickups in the offseason of USL Championship play.
And the Rowdies finished 6th last year on 50 points, lost in the conference semifinals. Look, Jennings, Farr, Josh Perez, Doherty, Kleeman, Damian Rivera's out, Eddie Manjoma. We're talking about guys who played really, really big minutes. And look, whether it's Castellanos coming in, it's Bassett from Canada, it's Van Kayazil, Lawrence Wyke is back. It's going to look a lot different.
Well, it's going to look a lot different, but it's also going to look very similar because all these guys have played together and played on this team together.
Right.
Different regime. That was Lee Cohen. That was Neil Collins. That was the changeover where it was like, okay, we're not going to be this high-profile Joe Cole, right, of Marcel Schaefer, the 17 team that took this league by storm back then. They started to find a real structure within the organization. Friendly reminder also, Forrest Lasso will eventually make his way back into this conversation after coming back from injury. This is simple. win a title.
Yep.
That's what it's come to for the Tampa Bay Rowdies in the best of ways. Aspirations every single year cannot be higher. That comes with a ton of pressure. I like the organization. I like the front office. I like the players. There is nothing for this team to do left in this league than to go win a title.
Yep, and hopefully all's well at Al Lang. Obviously, the way things ended at the end of the season, horrifying on a number of levels with the hurricane that ripped through there. So I'm sure more on that to come. Meanwhile, happy trails. Steven Dos Santos announced his retirement. Champion in this league, Seth Kasipli, and his beautiful mustache are headed to the private sector. Solomon Asante is making the move to League One, joining the expansion team in Texoma. We'll keep an eye on that. When we come back, Mailbag. USL All Access.
You're listening to USL All Access on SiriusXM FC. Here are your hosts, Mike Watts and Devin Kerr.
We're back on USL All Access on this Tuesday night. This is a show for the people, by two people. Mike Watts, Devin Kerr. Dev, we haven't done this in a minute. Mailbag?
Mailbag.
No one ever has questions for us unless it's about promotion relegation. So why don't we get to it?
Look, if only there was some expansion news.
I know. There's going to be a combination of what we do and don't know and what we can and cannot in good conscience say without burning a source. So Let's just get that out of the way up front. All right, Dev, with the news of a D1 league, everyone, multiple, asked you to your bat signal for questions. Would it implement promotion relegation immediately? Look, there's the checkbox format that I talked about earlier. Either that standard needs to change or there's going to have to be discussions about how to implement it, right? U.S. Soccer's never had to have this conversation. It's a conversation that's going to need to be advanced to ultimately have a true answer to that question. But are the majority of owners, I don't know if I'd say majority, but I'd say there's a healthy contingent at minimum that would like to see it.
No, it's not going to happen immediately. I do believe that they should change the parameters of operating procedure. We talked about that in segment 1, but it's still not going to affect what the USL HQ head office, whatever you want to call it, views as their inaugural year in 2027. That's going to be a single D1 league. It will not have pro rel right away. I think if you're a betting person, you're probably looking somewhere between 5 and 10 if you're hopeful. If you really want to ask Santa Claus for an early Christmas present, you want it in 5 years, and that's probably being a little bit fortunate, if you wanted my opinion. I'm going to give you the next one here, at SmittyCoach11. That question, by the way, I try to get as many people as possible. Great response by all of you. That question came from a ton of different sources. This one, SmittyCoach11. Pro rel wouldn't work in MLS due to risk. How do you get USL Championship, League One, etc. on board with the risk associated for owners? For instance, San Diego, $500 million. He's saying you don't want to implement pro rel because the lower team's going to pay less to come through. How would you implement that?
For one, the Premier League has parachute payments. No one in U.S. soccer is prepared to make a parachute payment to a
Broadcast
team that goes
takes
down.
care of that on its own. Absolutely.
In the long run, that is the goal. That is not where most leagues are right now. I think there's probably in the long run going to be an understanding adapt or die to steal from Moneyball. That would be my thought.
Also understand that they've already answered some of this through the application process. They're telling teams, hey, we're going to be willing to consider you as a brand new entity. And if you're the storied tradition, none greater than Louisville City, that is the standard bearer in the USL Championship. You want to come play in the Division I League? Sure. We'll let you come in. And there are going to be guidelines that they're going to have to follow. You don't necessarily have to make that leap. So I do believe that it's not going to be, oh, hey, just because you're in the championship, you all get to go play in the Division I. No, that's not how it's going to work whatsoever. You are going to be given a window. And I think it's going to be a very small one, Mike, where you can go and take that leap, and then things are going to start to get really interesting. We've got about a minute here, Mike, 60 seconds. Should there be a cap on D1 and D2 teams?
Yeah, and I think it's 24 or 26.
I'm kind of right there in the realm with you. Again, I think you could build. Bigger isn't always necessarily better, but that seems to be the ceiling. Start small, get bigger. Mike, should teams, I think this is one of the best questions, by the way, heard it from multiple people. Should teams have to start, if there are 3 divisions, 1, 2, 3, do they have to start in the 3rd and work their way up. Let's say we're 4 seasons into the Division I entity of USL. It's 2030.
Yep.
Do you start in D3 and go up?
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
Sporting merit.
That's an interesting one. And I think it's certainly another way that you take a different route in American soccer. Last but not least, 2 people asked this. Any chance of a Canadian Premier League and USL Championship in cup competition? I'll tell you what, that ain't a pipe dream. We're about 18 months removed from that nearly happening, and the possibility on the back end of getting a what is now CONCACAF Champions Cup bid. I think anything's possible in the future. Certainly great submissions, and appreciate everybody sending their thoughts in.
Dev, did you learn anything from this show?
I learned that it was possible for me to lean for nearly an hour. And wow. I still have blood moving through my leg. Who knew?
That's great. And I learned if you ask for questions about sanctioning and divisions in this country, get ready to see ProRel in your feed a lot.
Oh, yeah.
For Dev, Emmett, Mike, thanks for listening this week. We'll talk to you again next Tuesday night. Enjoy your week, everyone. So long for now.
This is USL All Access. If you missed any portion of the program, listen back anytime on the SXM app.